Right, so we're diving into the Lincoln assassination,
Oh, yeah.
a pivotal moment in American history.
Absolutely.
It's not just the assassination itself,
Right.
but the manhunt,
Yeah.
the trial,
Mm-hmm.
the echoes it left on America.
Mm-hmm.
Got some fascinating sources here, including excerpts from a military staff ride guide. It reads like a thriller, honestly.
It's, what makes this event so compelling is the context.
Yeah.
Imagine 1865. The nation is exhausted from the Civil War. Lee's surrender is fresh, but tensions are sky high.
Right.
And on that fateful day, Lincoln was commemorating the retaking of Fort Sumter.
Wow.
A symbol of the Union's resilience turned into a scene of tragedy.
Talk about a turning point.
Yeah.
And speaking of turning points,
Yeah.
the staff ride guide dives deep into John Wilkes Booth,
Right.
the man who assassinated Lincoln.
Yes.
He wasn't just some random guy.
No.
He was a famous actor, a Confederate sympathizer,
Uh-huh.
obsessed with fame,
Yeah.
driven to make history.
That's right.
It's important to understand that Booth's initial plan wasn't assassination.
No.
He and his co-conspirators actually wanted to kidnap Lincoln,
That's right.
hold him hostage,
Uh-huh.
and force the Union to release Confederate prisoners.
They saw it as a desperate gambit to save the crumbling Confederacy.
Kidnapping the president, that's a wild idea.
It is.
The guide describes Booth's network, using boarding houses and taverns as secret meeting spots, recruiting accomplices.
Yeah.
It even mentions a trip Booth took to Montreal,
Oh, wow.
a hotbed of Confederate sympathizers at the time, nicknamed Little Richmond.
I see.
What was he hoping to gain there?
He was seeking support, possibly funding,
Right.
and connections to further his kidnapping plot.
Oh, okay.
Imagine the audacity of going to enemy territory to drum up support for such a scheme.
Yeah.
But this wasn't just talk. There were actual attempts to kidnap Lincoln that came dangerously close to succeeding. The guide details one instance where Booth and his team were ready to ambush Lincoln's carriage near a hospital, but Lincoln never showed up.
Wow. It makes you wonder how aware Lincoln was of the dangers surrounding him.
Right.
Was he living with a constant sense of fear?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But sources suggest that while security measures existed, they weren't as robust as we see today.
Right.
It raises questions about how seriously the threat against Lincoln was taken.
What's even more chilling is that Booth's plan took a darker turn after Lincoln gave a speech advocating voting rights for Black Americans.
Oh, I see.
The guide suggests this was a catalyst for Booth's rage,
Wow.
ultimately driving him to abandon kidnapping for assassination.
Booth saw Lincoln's vision for a more inclusive society as a direct threat to his ideals.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that political violence is often fueled by ideological extremism and a refusal to accept opposing viewpoints.
So let's set the scene for that fateful night.
Okay.
April 14th, 1865.
Right.
Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. is packed. Lincoln is there with his wife and guests, enjoying a performance of the play, Our American Cousin.
Imagine the atmosphere. A lighthearted comedy.
Yeah.
Laughter filling the theater.
Right.
People seeking respite from the weight of war and uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stark contrast to the darkness about to unfold.
And here's where the story gets even more chilling.
Right.
Booth wasn't just after Lincoln.
Right.
He had planned simultaneous attacks on other key figures.
Oh, wow.
Vice President Johnson, Secretary of State Seward, and General Grant.
It wasn't a random act of violence, but a meticulously planned conspiracy
Wow.
aimed at decapitating the Union leadership.
While the play is going on, Booth sneaks up to the presidential box, armed with a Derringer pistol and a knife.
Okay.
And during a moment of laughter, he shoots Lincoln in the back of the head.
Chaos erupts.
Oh, my God.
The audience, moments ago enjoying a lighthearted comedy,
Yeah.
is now plunged into a nightmare.
Booth then jumps from the box onto the stage,
Right.
shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis," a Latin phrase meaning, "thus always to tyrants."
Uh-huh.
He escapes through the back,
Yeah.
leaving behind a scene of panic and confusion.
But there was one act of defiance during Booth's escape.
Really?
Major Rathbone, who was in the presidential box, tried to stop him.
Wow.
He lunged at Booth, but was slashed with the knife.
Oh, my goodness.
Despite the chaos, someone tried to fight back.
What a dramatic scene. It's hard to imagine the horror that unfolded in those few minutes.
Oh, no.
And in the aftermath, Lincoln is carried across the street to a boarding house, the Peterson House, as doctors frantically try to save him.
It's a surreal image. The President of the United States, mortally wounded, lying in a stranger's boarding house. It
Yeah.
underscores the chaos and desperation of the moment.
It's like something out of a movie. And as doctors are working on Lincoln,
Yeah.
his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, is there, overcome with grief.
Right?
Secretary of War Stanton takes charge, essentially launching the manhunt for Booth from that very room.
Stanton, known for his decisiveness, wasted no time. Imagine the weight of responsibility he felt in that moment, having to lead a nation reeling from this tragedy.
The scale of the manhunt is incredible.
Yeah.
Thousands of soldiers and civilians are involved,
Right.
fueled by a mix of grief, anger, and a thirst for justice. And to incentivize the search, the government offered a massive reward, $100,000. That was a fortune back then.
It shows how determined they were to catch Booth and his accomplices.
Wow.
Imagine the pressure on Booth and Harold, knowing that every stranger they encountered could be their captor.
They must have been constantly looking over their shoulders, knowing that the net was closing in. The guide goes into detail about their harrowing escape route, back roads, safe houses,
Right.
even getting help from Confederate sympathizers along the way.
They were desperate, resourceful,
Right.
and determined to evade capture. It's a classic cat and mouse chase, with the Union forces relentlessly pursuing them.
But despite their efforts, Booth and Harold are eventually cornered in a barn in Virginia.
Oh.
Harold surrenders, but Booth refuses to come out.
It's a tense standoff.
Right.
Booth is trapped, defiant, and refuses to give up.
Wow.
He's barricaded inside the barn, which is set on fire.
Oh my gosh.
It's a dramatic final act for a man who craved the spotlight.
And in a controversial moment, Sergeant Boston Corbett shoots Booth through a crack in the barn wall, fatally wounding him.
Corbett claimed he saw Booth armed and feared he would escape. But some question whether the shooting was justified.
Yeah.
It's one of those historical moments shrouded in uncertainty and debate.
So Booth is dead.
Right.
But the story doesn't end there.
No.
8 people are arrested and charged with conspiring in the assassination.
Wow.
The question becomes where to hold the trial. A civilian court or a military tribunal?
It wasn't a simple decision.
Yeah.
Secretary of War Stanton and Judge Advocate General Joseph Holt pushed for a military tribunal, arguing that the assassination was a war crime and a threat to national security.
They were concerned that a civilian jury might be swayed by Confederate sympathizers.
Yes.
Or intimidated by the politically charged atmosphere.
Remember, the nation was still deeply divided and emotions were running high.
Yeah.
Stanton and Holt believed that a military tribunal would offer a more controlled environment,
Right.
ensuring a fair and impartial trial.
But this decision wasn't without controversy.
That's true.
Some saw it as a violation of the conspirators' constitutional rights.
Yeah.
A dangerous precedent of using military courts to try civilians.
Right.
It's a debate that continues to resonate even today.
And it's a reminder that even in the face of national tragedy,
Right.
the principles of justice and due process must be upheld.
Absolutely.
The line between national security and individual liberties can be blurry, especially during times of crisis.
The trial itself was a spectacle. Conflicting testimonies, impassioned arguments,
Right.
and ultimately verdicts that would shape the course of history.
And despite the convictions, certain mysteries remained. Was there a larger Confederate conspiracy behind the assassination? What role did Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, play?
That's interesting.
These questions linger, fueling historical debate even today. The prosecution worked hard to connect each conspirator to John Wilkes Booth and the plot itself.
Right.
Their goal was to paint a picture of a dangerous group actively trying to undermine the Union.
One of the most controversial figures in this case was Mary Surratt,
Yes.
the owner of the boarding house where Booth and his accomplices often met.
Right.
The staff ride guide really digs into her story,
Yeah.
highlighting the arguments used by her defense team.
They portrayed her as an unwitting pawn, a simple boarding house proprietor who had no idea what was being planned under her roof.
Right.
They tried to create distance between her and the other conspirators, claiming she was a victim of circumstance.
But the prosecution pushed back hard.
Yeah, they
They brought in witnesses who claimed she knew more than she let on. They highlighted her connection to Booth, her trips to her tavern where weapons were stashed, and even a suspicious encounter she had with Lewis Powell, one of the conspirators,
I see.
on the night of the assassination.
The prosecution was chipping away at this image of Mary Surratt as an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
They were suggesting she was more involved than she claimed.
And then there's Dr. Samuel Mudd, the doctor who treated Booth's broken leg after the assassination.
Right.
His defense was straightforward. He was a doctor doing his duty,
Yeah.
treating an injured man without knowing who he really was or what he had done.
But the guide reveals some interesting details about Mudd.
Oh,
It turns out he had met Booth before and may have even been involved in the earlier kidnapping plot.
Oh.
There's also the fact that he waited a while before reporting Booth's visit to the authorities,
Right.
which raised suspicions about his true motives.
It seems like a tough case for the prosecution to prove.
Yeah.
But they focused on inconsistencies in Mudd's story, trying to cast doubt on his claims of innocence.
And then there were the other conspirators, like Michael O'Loughlin and Samuel Arnold.
Yeah.
They had been part of the kidnapping plot initially, but claimed they had backed out before the assassination happened.
Their lawyers argued they were no longer involved with Booth
Right.
and shouldn't be held responsible for his actions.
Uh-huh.
But the prosecution countered that their prior involvement, regardless of whether they were present at the assassination,
Yeah.
was enough to tie them to the conspiracy.
After all the testimonies and arguments, the military commission delivered its verdicts.
Right.
4 conspirators, including Mary Surratt,
Yeah.
were sentenced to death by hanging.
It was a harsh sentence,
It was.
reflecting the gravity of the crime and the nation's unwavering pursuit of justice.
Mary Surratt's hanging is a particularly chilling detail.
Right.
She was the first woman to be executed by the U.S. federal government.
It underscores the weight of this case and its lasting impact on legal history.
The remaining 4 conspirators received prison sentences of varying lengths.
But even after the trial ended,
Yes.
there were lingering questions about the extent of Confederate involvement.
There were whispers that Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, had orchestrated the whole assassination.
Wow.
Others, including John Surratt, who had fled to Canada and was later captured,
Right.
insisted that the Confederacy knew nothing about Booth's plan.
It's one of those historical debates that continues to fascinate people.
It is.
There's evidence and interpretations pointing in different directions,
Yeah.
making it difficult to arrive at a definitive answer.
But regardless of Davis's involvement, the assassination had a profound impact on the future of the United States,
Yeah.
particularly during the era of Reconstruction.
The guide raises a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
How did Lincoln's assassination impact Reconstruction,
Right.
the complex process of rebuilding the nation after the Civil War?
Uh-huh.
Would things have been different if Lincoln had lived?
It's one of history's great what-ifs.
Right. We know that Andrew Johnson, who became president after Lincoln,
Yeah.
had a much more lenient view of the South.
Right.
Would Lincoln have been more forceful in pushing for civil rights and equality? Would he have been more successful in healing the divisions between North and South?
It's certainly a question worth pondering.
It is.
The assassination robbed the nation of a leader who had the vision and perhaps the political skill to navigate the turbulent waters of Reconstruction. And beyond the political implications, the trial itself had a lasting impact on legal jurisprudence.
Right.
Using a military commission to try civilians sparked a debate about due process and the right to a fair trial, a debate that continues to this day.
The guide mentions the Supreme Court's ex parte Milligan decision in 1866,
Yes.
which ruled that military tribunals could not be used to try civilians when civilian courts were functioning.
Right.
This landmark ruling directly addressed the concerns raised by the Lincoln conspiracy trial and had a significant impact on American law.
It's fascinating to see how this single event, a brutal assassination, had such far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
It shaped not just politics and law, but also how we remember Lincoln himself.
The guide talks about how Lincoln's image has been used and reinterpreted throughout history.
Right.
He's often portrayed as a martyr, a symbol of American ideals, the great emancipator, the savior of the Union. But it's important to remember that he was also a complex figure,
Yeah.
a politician who made tough decisions and faced fierce opposition.
It's interesting to consider how our understanding of Lincoln has evolved over time,
Right.
often reflecting the social and political climate of different eras.
The guide emphasizes the importance of places like Ford's Theater and the Peterson House in preserving the story of the assassination.
Yeah.
They're not just tourist attractions, but living memorials that allow us to connect with the past in a tangible way.
They're places where we can reflect on the fragility of democracy, the human cost of political violence, and the importance of safeguarding our institutions.
And then there's the phenomenon of conspiracy theories,
Oh, yeah.
which seem to spring up around almost every major historical event.
Right.
Even decades after the assassination, people were still trying to piece together the puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
coming up with alternative explanations and pointing fingers at unexpected suspects.
The guide mentions the persistent theory that Jefferson Davis was the mastermind behind the plot.
Yeah.
It's a theory fueled by a desire to find a scapegoat, someone to blame for this national tragedy.
It seems like some people couldn't accept that a lone actor like Booth, driven by his own twisted motivations,
Right.
could be responsible for such a momentous act.
Mm-hmm.
They needed a bigger, more sinister explanation.
And then there were even wilder theories implicating figures within the Union government itself, like Vice President Johnson or Secretary of War Stanton. Wow. These theories, while lacking evidence, highlight the deep mistrust and suspicion that permeated American society at the time.
It's a reminder that in times of crisis and uncertainty,
Yeah.
conspiracy theories can thrive, feeding off fear, anger, and the need for simple explanations.
And let's not forget the role of the media.
Right.
The guide describes how newspapers, in their rush to report on the assassination, sometimes published inaccurate information, adding to the confusion and speculation surrounding the event.
It's interesting to draw parallels to our own time,
Yeah.
where the constant flow of information,
Right.
often conflicting and unverified, makes it difficult to separate truth from fiction.
It emphasizes the importance of critical thinking,
Absolutely.
of questioning sources,
Right.
and evaluating different perspectives before forming our own conclusions.
Absolutely. We need to be discerning consumers of information,
Yes.
especially when it comes to understanding complex historical events.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The assassination,
Yeah.
the manhunt,
Right.
the trial,
Uh-huh.
the lingering questions.
But what about the legacy of this event?
Right.
How does it continue to resonate with us today?
That's a crucial question. We've delved into the details,
Right.
but it's important to step back and consider the broader significance of this moment in history.
Absolutely.
What lessons can we learn from the Lincoln assassination? How does it inform our understanding of democracy,
Right.
leadership,
Yeah.
and the dangers of political violence?
Mhm.
The Lincoln assassination, it serves as a stark reminder
Yeah.
of how fragile democracy can be.
Right.
You know, it's a reminder that even in a nation founded on principles of liberty and self-governance, those values can be threatened.
Right.
And those in power can become targets of violence.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how this event changed the way we protect our leaders today.
Right.
I mean, the Secret Service
Yeah.
didn't even exist before Lincoln was assassinated.
Exactly. The assassination was a turning point.
Right.
It forced the nation to confront the need for better security measures to protect the president. The Secret Service was created just a few months after Lincoln's death,
Wow.
initially to combat counterfeiting.
Right.
But its mission quickly expanded to include presidential protection.
It's fascinating to see how that one tragic night at Ford's Theater
Yeah.
led to the security measures we see today. Everything from metal detectors to motorcades
Right.
to the constant presence of Secret Service agents
Yeah.
can be traced back to that event.
And beyond the physical security measures, Lincoln's assassination also had a profound impact
Right.
on how we view the presidency itself.
Yeah.
You know, it transformed him from a political figure into a martyr,
Right.
a symbol of American ideal.
The guide really digs into this idea of Lincoln as a symbol.
Yeah.
It talks about how his image has been used and reinterpreted throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
He's been portrayed as the great emancipator,
Right.
the savior of the Union,
Yeah.
the embodiment of honesty and integrity. It's amazing how his legacy has been shaped to fit different narratives and agendas.
His tragic death amplified his message in a way,
Right.
you know, giving his words and actions even more weight. It's interesting to consider how different things might have been if he had lived.
Yeah.
Would we view him in the same way?
Right.
Would Reconstruction have unfolded differently?
Yeah.
It's a question that historians continue to debate.
It's hard to imagine the course of American history without considering the impact of Lincoln's assassination. It's a story that's both tragic and inspiring.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the dark side of our past,
Right.
while also reminding us of the enduring power of resilience, compassion, and the pursuit of justice.
And it challenges us to learn from the past,
Yeah.
to protect our democratic institutions,
Absolutely.
and to strive for a more just and equitable society,
Right.
one that embodies the ideals that Lincoln so passionately championed.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Lincoln assassination,
Yeah.
I think it's crucial to remember that history isn't just a collection of names, dates, and events.
Right.
It's a living narrative woven from the choices, actions,
Yeah.
and consequences of individuals.
The assassination of Abraham Lincoln is a powerful reminder
Absolutely.
that even seemingly small actions can have ripple effects
Right.
that shape the course of history.
Yeah.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and challenge us, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths, to wrestle with complex ethical dilemmas,
Right.
and to ponder the enduring questions of leadership, justice, and the human condition.
What insights resonated with you? What questions are you left pondering?
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring the complexities of history.